100 Unanswered Questions About Death to Sleep. Chill 2. Death is the great equalizer, the one experience every living being will share, yet the one mystery no one can return to explain. It's the silent question mark at the end of every life story, the shadow that gives shape to the light. What happens when we die? Does something persist, or do we dissolve into nothingness? Is death an end, a transition, or an illusion? Tonight, we'll wander through 100 of the most haunting, unanswerable questions about death, not to unsettle you, but to invite contemplation, to lull your mind into that liminal space between waking and sleep, where curiosity and calm intertwine. Let these questions drift through your thoughts like embers on a dark river, illuminating just enough to deepen the mystery. 1. The nature of death. Is death a moment or a process? When exactly does life end? If consciousness arises from the brain, what happens when the brain stops? Could death be a hallucination, a final trick of the dying mind? Why do some people experience clinical death and return, while others don't? Is there such a thing as true death, or is it all just transformation? 2. The afterlife hypotheses. If an afterlife exists, is it personal, heaven, hell, or impersonal, energy recycling? Do near-death experiences prove an afterlife, or are they brain chemistry? Why do afterlife visions across cultures share similar themes, light, tunnels, beings? If reincarnation is real, why don't we remember past lives? Could the afterlife be a shared hallucination, a dream we all enter? 3. Time, death, and eternity. If time is an illusion, does death even happen? In a block universe, is your life already eternally frozen in space-time? Could quantum immortality mean you never experience your own death? If the universe repeats infinitely, will you live this exact life again? Is death the only thing that makes time feel real? 4. The fear of nothingness. Why does the idea of nothing after death terrify us more than hell? Can a mind truly conceive of its own non-existence? If death is like dreamless sleep, why do we fear it and not sleep? Is our fear of death just a biological program to keep us alive? Would immortality make life meaningless? 5. The physics of dying. Do our atoms remember being part of us after we die? Could consciousness be a quantum phenomenon that persists? If information is never lost, black hole paradox, does that include you? Is death just entropy winning, or is there a deeper order? Could we someday prove death is an illusion? 6. Cultural death myths. Why do all human cultures bury, burn, or preserve their dead? Do ghosts exist, or are they psychological projections? Why do we dream of the dead more than the living? Is the dancing plague proof that death can be contagious in the mind? Why do some people feel the presence of the dead long after they're gone? 7. The ethics of death. If we cure aging, will overpopulation destroy the planet? Should euthanasia be a human right? Is it cruel to keep coma patients alive indefinitely? Would uploading consciousness be cheating death or creating a copy? If we resurrect the dead via cloning, would it really be them? 8. Death and meaning. Does death give life meaning or rob it of meaning? If the universe forgets us, does anything we did matter? Why do we memorialize some deaths and ignore others? Is grief the price of love, or is love the consolation for grief? Would you live differently if you knew the exact date of your death? 9. The future of death. Will AI ever truly understand death? Could we someday pause death indefinitely? Will future humans consider death optional? If we merge with machines, will we still fear death? Is death the final frontier or just an engineering problem? 10. The ultimate question. If you could know the truth about death, would you want to? Let these questions linger in the quiet of your mind. There are no answers here, only the soft hum of the unknown, the gentle pull of curiosity. And perhaps, in that uncertainty, there's a strange kind of peace. After all, if death is life's greatest mystery, then living is the act of savoring the question. Now, close your eyes and drift. 11. Consciousness beyond the body. If consciousness isn't produced by the brain but merely filtered through it, where does it go when the filter breaks? Why do some terminal patients report seeing deceased loved ones days before dying? Could the whole life flash phenomenon be consciousness decompressing from time? Do psychedelic experiences of ego death reveal truths about actual death? Why do identical twins sometimes report sensing each other's deaths across distances? 12. Biological mysteries of dying. Why does the body sometimes give up long before it medically should? What triggers the exact moment of death when all organs are failing? Why do some corpses remain eerily preserved for years without explanation? Is the smell of death detectable by some humans before medical death occurs? Why do certain animals instinctively know when death is coming? 13. Quantum perspectives on death. If quantum particles can exist in superposition, could consciousness do the same after death? Does the observer effect mean the universe requires living observers to exist? Could entanglement explain why some feel connected to the dead? In the many worlds interpretation, does every death branch into a survival? Is the collapse of the wave function related to the collapse of consciousness? 14. Historical death anomalies. Why do some ancient tombs contain machinery suggesting belief in technological resurrection? What explains the worldwide phenomenon of revenants in medieval records? Why did multiple ancient cultures build monuments aligned with afterlife astronomy? How did the Tibetan Book of the Dead describe near-death experiences centuries before modern medicine? Why do some uncontacted tribes have identical death rituals to ancient civilizations? 15. The psychology of mortality. Why do children, as young as 3, instinctively understand death's finality? What causes the overwhelming urge to put affairs in order in the dying? Is the midlife crisis really just the first true confrontation with mortality? Why do some people develop terminal lucidity just before death? Can the human mind actually comprehend its own mortality? 16. Unexplained phenomena at death. Why do clocks often stop at the moment of death? What causes the well-documented deathbed visions across cultures? Why do some people accurately predict their time of death? What explains the sudden temperature drops reported at death scenes? Why do some graves refuse to grow vegetation? 17. Philosophical paradoxes of death. If you can't experience being dead, does it matter that it's coming? Is fear of death actually fear of the dying process? Can something that happens to everyone truly be considered bad? If the universe is infinite, does that make your death statistically insignificant? Does contemplating death enhance life or rob you of present joy? 18. The science we don't yet understand. Why does cellular death sometimes reverse spontaneously? What causes the burst of brain activity 30 seconds after clinical death? Why do some transplant recipients inherit memories from donors? What explains the 21-gram weight loss at death? Could death be an evolutionary adaptation we might someday overcome? 20. The final 5 questions. If death didn't exist, would we still invent it? Does the universe care that you lived and died? Is accepting death the same as surrendering to it? Could death be the universe's way of forcing evolution? And ultimately, does any of this matter when you're gone? Let these questions dissolve into the quiet of your mind like ink in water. There are no conclusions here, only the gentle hum of mystery, the soft edges of the unknowable. Perhaps death's greatest gift is the way its mystery makes life shimmer with fleeting beauty. Now release these thoughts and let yourself drift deeper into the quiet, into the dark, into peace. 21. The mathematics of mortality. Why does human consciousness emerge just to inevitably disappear? If the universe tends toward disorder, is death just entropy manifest? Could immortality paradoxically require the death of the universe? Why does the human lifespan cluster around 70 to 80 years instead of 30 or 300? Is there a hidden mathematical pattern to when and how we die? 22. The language of death. Why do all languages develop euphemisms for death before literal terms? What explains the universal human need to name and personify death? Why do we say passed away instead of stopped functioning? How does the brain process final words differently than normal speech? Could there be concepts about death we lack words to describe? 23. The architecture of the afterlife. If an afterlife exists, what are its physical laws and dimensions? Why do afterlife descriptions always include recognizable earthly elements? Could multiple contradictory afterlives exist simultaneously? What would an afterlife designed by artificial intelligence look like? Is hell psychologically necessary for heaven to have meaning? 24. The technology of immortality. At what point would a brain upload cease being you? Could we someday pause death indefinitely through cryonics? Why hasn't evolution produced truly immortal complex life? Would eliminating death destroy what makes us human? Is death the universe's way of preventing outdated minds? 25. The forgotten dead. Why do we remember some historical figures but not others? What percentage of humans are completely forgotten after death? Does being forgotten constitute a second death? Why do we care about being remembered after we're gone? Could digital avatars preserve some form of posthumous existence? 26. The biology of grief. Why does grief physically hurt? What evolutionary purpose does prolonged grief serve? Why do some people die shortly after their spouse? Is there a biological limit to how much loss one can endure? Could grief be the price we pay for complex social bonds? 27. The physics of the soul. If souls exist, what are they made of? How would a non-physical entity interact with the physical world? Could dark matter or dark energy relate to consciousness? Why hasn't physics detected any soul substance? If energy can't be created or destroyed, where does consciousness go? 28. The memory paradox. When someone dies, which version of them survives in memory? Why do we remember the dead differently than how they actually were? Does reconstructing someone in memory create a new version of them? At what point does a memory become more fiction than fact? Why do some memories of the dead feel more real than reality? 29. The evolution of death rituals. Why did humans start burying their dead 100,000 years ago? What explains the universal ritual of washing the body? Why do some cultures celebrate death while others mourn? How did death rituals shape early human societies? Will digital death rituals replace physical ones? Let these questions carry you beyond thought, beyond fear, into that quiet space where wonder and peace meet. The mystery remains, but so does the extraordinary privilege of being here to ponder it. Now release each question like a leaf on water. Watch it drift away.